Do you like to work with crazy sellers during the listing period? You know that time from they sign the listing and until they get an offer, there's that listing period that sometimes sellers just turn into whack jobs. Well, let me tell you how you can circumvent that whole issue. Chris Stafford, 30 plus year listing agent, also the founder of the Listing Collective. And I can tell you one thing for sure, and that is it is super important that you absolutely handle the situation with sellers so that you don't have to deal with crazy sellers. So here's what you want to do. Number one, you want to act like a therapist with your seller. You know, they're going to say all kinds of crazy things, you know, and they're going to say, have you called the neighborhood cat to find buyers for my house? And you're just going to nod, smile, and not get emotionally reactive. Try to keep your emotions in between the lines, okay? That's one of the most difficult things. I know it's difficult for me personally, but you have to be the soothing, rational voice here. And sometimes it's going to require some practice. So don't let sellers get under your skin. It seems to me that I always have like one seller per year that really just gets under my skin and I let it bother me. And one time I remember I actually had a $7 million listing and the seller thought they knew everything better than I did. They micromanaged me to death and I couldn't stand it. So I ended up firing them. I fired a $7 million seller, but it was worth it for my sanity. Trust me. One of the other things that you should be doing too to make your role as the listing agent a lot smoother is to be constantly asking for price reductions. You should start asking for price reductions at the very beginning when they sign the listing agreement. Hey, if we don't get a listing, an offer in 3 weeks, guess what? We need to reduce the price. And you know what you do is if you're constantly talking about price reductions, the cool thing is it just makes it a lot easier to bring it up 3 weeks later. It's not a new topic and they have internally sort of agreed to it already. So you always want to be asking for price reductions or talking about price reductions. Talking about it, you know, under the veil of this is what buyers are saying, this is what other agents are saying, that we may be priced too heavily. One thing that I always like to do too, in addition to that, is keep them busy. Keep your sellers busy doing stuff to fix the house up, to improve the house. I mean, you know, yes, paint out that lime green kitchen, clean out all the clutter out of the garage. Sometimes if you just keep them busy, then you're actually going to keep them out of your hair. And I think that is something that's, you know, really important. If you celebrate your wins, I think that's another thing that's really important. You know, even if the only thing that happens that week is a buyer comes in and says, this house smells like soup, you know, put a positive spin on it. Of course it does. At least we got a buyer in. So that is a really exciting thing. Let the sellers know. You know, in addition, part and parcel of that is to make sure that you're always communicating, over communicate with your sellers, even if you have nothing to tell them. One of the things I do is make it a point to contact my sellers once or twice a week, even if I have nothing to say, and just say, hey, listen, we haven't had any buyers, the market's slow right now, we may have to consider doing a price reduction. But always, even if you have nothing to say, check in. Because if you don't over communicate with your sellers, guess what? Your sellers are going to manufacture all this crazy stuff in their head about what's going on with the selling of their property. And you want to circumvent that. Isn't that correct? And then the other thing too is set expectations. You want to set expectations with your sellers and then lower those expectations. You know, let them know that in this particular market, it may take 2, 3, 4 months to get a listing, to get a purchase contract, that we need to consistently market the property, but we don't have to do open houses every single weekend, but you're willing to show it to any buyer at any time during the week. But set expectations. I think that the thing that I love doing is when I first meet with sellers, and especially after we sign the listing agreement, What I love doing is talk about how the process works, talk about how often you're going to communicate with them, talk about how your marketing works, i.e., 80% of the marketing is stuff I'm doing behind the scenes that you don't know about, okay? And when you talk about these things and educate them how your marketing works, I have a very active marketing approach. You can tell them this. I have this right in my pre-listing package. If you want a copy of my pre-listing package, just put package down in the comments below. But what you want to do is tell them you don't need to do open houses every weekend. If you are like me and you hate doing open houses, maybe you only have the first couple open houses and then pull back on the open houses. But tell them what else you're doing. Tell them about all the marketing you're doing behind the scenes. Like for me, I tell them this. I say, listen, I'm not like all other real estate agents, basically just doing an open house, putting an ad in the paper, and passively waiting for buyers to come to me. I am actively marketing the property. I'm actively going out into the community and shaking the bushes to try to find buyers for the property. I'm out there calling hundreds of people in the neighborhood and in surrounding areas advertising your house for sale. You can't see that I'm doing that, but I just want you to know that I am doing that. Or you're doing an electronic marketing strategy that's going to involve, contacting many, many real estate agents, not just around the city, but also around the state and around the country. But these are all great talking points with sellers that you can have throughout that listing period, throughout that listing process, because it's a great way for you to stay in touch with them. It's a great way for you to be that therapist that we're talking about and always be talking about the price reductions, keeping them busy, getting them to do things that they should be doing around the house to make the house smell better, look better, you name it. And also remember to celebrate your wins and set your expectations and make sure you're setting low expectations. So don't promise them the moon. That's going to be really the worst case. But I think, being the therapist is one thing that I think is really most difficult and the most challenging, but the most important. Because when your seller calls you up and you're like, hey, should I plant an upside down St. Joseph statue, by the front porch? And you try not to roll your eyes, and then you think, well, what can it hurt? So I hope this helps in terms of you working with sellers during the listing period. And if you want to talk more about how we can structure and customize a whole marketing strategy for you to get a lot more listings, to 2, 5, 10 extra listings, make sure that you hit the link down below. Let's jump on the call. I'd love to talk to you. Otherwise, make it a great day, guys.